Good morning, CLC. In this moment and at this time, I invite each and every one of you to allow the great wave that is Spirit itself to gently wash over you, cleansing your spirits, renewing your soul. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice deep cleansing breath in, breathing in love and light. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. Any doubt, stress, tension, or anxiety, just let it go for now. For in this moment and at this time, we invite healing, love, divine light, and sacredness into us. Take another nice deep cleansing breath in, and as you release the breath, allow your body to relax and allow your mind to be here, now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself up to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply. filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one very special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This could be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in this room or even on this planet anymore. I turn to that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in this room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
And I understand there's been a new device installed here. It's called a trapdoor. And if speakers get up here and they speak too long, then apparently all of a sudden this thing opens and you disappear into the magic beyond. The song that you just sang is perfect because when I think about magic as a kid, yeah, the stuff that conjurers did fascinated me, but that wasn't the real magic that I was kind of attuned to. I used to look at the cosmos, read books, astronomy books, science books. This was the kind of magic that I looked at, the magic of the universe. And also, I remember one time I was sat in the house and we always had cats. We had one dog, but that's another story because it didn't last long. But we always had cats. And one time I was just sat there and the cat was kind of staring at me, and it just fascinated me how this was another live being that was in this room with me. And I just remember thinking, wow, it's so wonderful. So the magic that you're going to hear about today, there's a little bit about magic per se, but most of what you're going to hear is what they sung about, because it's the magic that inspired me. So we're also going to look at cosmologies, because that's also part of the magic. You know, cosmology is saying how the world, how the universe came into being. And for millennia, for millions of years, well, not millions, but tens of thousands of years, human beings have been fascinated by what's going on in the universe. But before I start, I want to thank somebody who sits in the front row. She usually gets up and does the closing. And last week, when she was doing her closing, she said, David forgot to mention that he was going to do the talk today. And then she said, and remember, he teaches world religions. And that put me in a completely different track. I wasn't going there at all. I mean, seriously, I was not going there at all. I was actually looking at a couple of books. One was an Ernest Holmes book, and the other one was about the magic that happened in Scotland when they were applying, the laws of manifestation You remember Reverend Jesse once gave a month's talk on this one, which is pretty cool. But it sent me in a completely different direction. I thought, that's right. The magic is how human beings have looked at the universe over the millennia and how we look at it today. So this is kind of where we're going today. But the first thing to mention is that new thought, of which science of mind is a part, is not new. It's thought, but it isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. But when I go back and look at cosmologies, believe it or not, science of mind has a cosmology. Did you know that? We actually have a cosmology. Ernest Holmes produced something called What We Believe. And it's actually always in one edition of the Science of Mind magazine. In August it was on page 10. And I want to read you 3 things from it. I'm not sure a handheld mic was a really brilliant thing. Not when you're trying to manage a book at the same time. But here it is. It's on page 10 of the August edition, by the way. Is it the August edition? July edition, sorry. And he says, in here, we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but it's not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It's the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. And technically that's called panentheism, which means God is all there is, and everything is within God. And then he goes on to say, we believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through a universal mind, which is the law of God, and that we're surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impress of our thoughts and acts upon it. He's talking there about the conscious, the objective aspect of the divine, and also the subconscious, which Ernest Holmes always called the law. And then, this is more to the crunch here. He says, we believe in the healing of the sick and the control of conditions through the power of this mind. And that's kind of where we're going today. So that is our cosmology. But cosmologies have been around for a long time. You know, I do teach world religions, and I usually start by talking about the Paleolithic era, which is the Old Stone Age. And up until now, I've honestly thought that the only thing that really concerned human beings in the Old Stone Age was the fact that they had to survive. So what you see in the caves are paintings of animals, and also you see a lot of figurines around. It's called the Venus figure, which is an exaggerated figurine of a pregnant woman. So the 2 things that were really of major concern to Paleolithic people was survival. They had to eat, and also they had to continue the race, which was the pregnant woman. We thought, well, they thought this was magic. We didn't think they knew anything about the cosmos. And this is where I've got to change what I teach about world religions. Now people think that the depictions of the animals in the caves, and the first one they discovered was at Lascaux in France, and then Altamara in Spain, and then lots of others around the world much older. But they depict animals which indeed were the animals that they were hunting and killing. But then they started to compare which animals were actually the most prevalent. And they found that when they compared this, they actually matched with constellations in the stars. So we now believe that ancient humans actually did study the cosmos. We didn't think they did that before. And even more to the point, which is getting onto what we talk about, which is science of mind, they thought that the depictions in the caves where they showed animals with spears in them, with arrows in them, just indicated the results of the hunt. But now they're thinking that it was something different, that what it actually was, that they were painting the pictures of the animals with the spears and the arrows in them, in order to put in their minds success for the hunt. So they were actually using their minds before they went out on the hunt. Is this true? I don't know, but it's the latest ideas that we come up from anthropologists, from archaeologists, and from scientists. This is what they currently believe. And the other thing that really occurred to me was that, and actually it was Erica who really told me about it. I was talking the other week to Erica, who's one of our newer patrons here, about astronomy, and she and her husband are members of the Houston Astronomical Society. Is that correct? And she told me something I didn't know. She said, yeah, you can talk about places which are, you know, devoid of excess light, such as down in Big Bend, but the real magic is that when you've been there for about a half an hour, your eyes actually physically change, and you can see farther into the distance than you could when you started. So no doubt about you, Erica, but I went in and I actually went on Gemini and I checked on this, and it's a fact, and it gave me the medical facts. You actually can see a lot farther, which means that human beings, even back then in the Paleolithic, could actually see out as far as Saturn and possibly, you know, at least one more planet beyond Saturn. So we've reason to believe that the ancients actually did start using the cosmos and actually using their minds in a way that we would now. Okay, so moving on a little bit from that. Also, back in ancient times, there's a religion that is still around today. Does anybody know what it is? It's a religion, well, it's kind of a religion that's been around since the Paleolithic era, the Neolithic era, and it's still around today. No, not the Druids. No, this is like thousands of years before the Druids. Shamanism. Shamanism? No, it's not what the Druids were, Lisa. No, it isn't. There's going to be an argument after the service. I can assure you about this. But listen, I have done my research, you know. Shamanism has been around since ancient times. The shamans did a lot of what we do now. They actually used their minds to communicate with spirits. They used their minds to produce effects. They did rain dances to produce rain. So in other words, they were doing the same kind of magic that we do when we do affirmative prayer. And it's still going on today. How do we know it? Because there are still shamans around today and we study them. One really interesting thing was that some researchers went down to the Amazon forest towards the end of the 20th century, and they were talking to like witch doctors, shamans, whatever you want to call them. And these witch doctors, shamans, were telling the researchers that they could actually communicate with the plants. They could communicate with the plants. And what did they see? They said they saw beings of light. What were they describing? Photons. They also saw something else. They saw the DNA structure of the plants. And then later on, Western research found DNA and its structure. And it was exactly the same as they've been telling them. So our minds are incredibly powerful. Our minds are actually magic. So as we kind of move on in history and we come to the Egyptian period, the Egyptians had a pantheon of gods. They had a creator god, Ra, Atum, the sun god. But they also had two gods that were incredibly important in everyday life. And one was called Heka, and the other one, Jesse actually did a month's talk on it, was Ma'at. Does anybody remember that? Okay. Yeah. So Heka is actually the Greek word for magic, but it's also a god. And they viewed this as the fundamental force that Ra, Atum, used when it brought the universe into existence. But it was also a force that they used in everyday life. So it was incredibly important. Combined with this, Ma'at was the thing that kept everything stable. It kept the universe going. It kept the universe from moving back into chaos. So the Egyptians in their everyday lives, from the pharaoh down to the farmer, were expected to live a moral life, but they were also expected to help maintain the cosmos and its existence by using the magic of Heka combined with the ongoing stability of Ma'at. So this was incredibly important. So the bottom line is that back in the Egyptian times, they were actually using magic, or using their minds, not just to actually think things, but actually to do what we do now, which is to actually influence nature, to influence what goes on. Because as you know, when we do spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer, as you heard what Ernest Holmes said, we use it to change conditions. We use it to heal the sick. And they were doing the same things way back then. So, a little bit about the Egyptians. Something also that came out of the Egyptian era, and Reverend Jesse did a months-long series about this, is something called the Hermetic Principle. This is Q&A time. I'm doing kind of an Arthur Johnson here. This is Q&A time. So who knows what the Hermetic Principle is? Some of you in the room do, right? It's as above, so below. This actually comes originally from Plato. Plato had something called his theory of forms. His theory of forms said that for everything that you see in the material world, there is a spiritual essence of it, which is the perfection of it. And that what you see in this plane of existence is simply a reflection of it. It's not the actual real thing. So we actually use this to combine our minds from above as below. So we are actually bringing into our existence the spiritual essence of that which is beyond. You know, throughout history, there have been periods when people could think freely. For instance, in a lot of the Greek era, where there's a lot of free thinking. But there's also been periods in history where people have not been allowed to think clearly. And I'm going to come into this shortly. So the reason for this is what Reverend Jesse would say is, well, it's crowd control. So initially, when Abraham came along, Abraham came into being about, 1,500 years ago, something like that. Eventually, they moved off and they moved into what is now Israel. But the move into Israel was actually involved in the story of Exodus. Who knows the book of Exodus? Most people are familiar with it, right? Okay. So what happens is Moses is wandering around and he comes across this burning bush which is not being consumed by the fire. And a voice in there tells him, when he says, "Who are you?" He says, "I am who I am." And then he says, "Go free my people in Israel." By this time the Egyptians had either enslaved or put into forced labor the Hebrews. And when he says, "Who shall I say sent me?" he's given the answer, "Tell them I am." So Moses goes off down into Egypt and he tells the Pharaoh, "Hey, God told me to tell you to let our people go." So the Pharaoh says, "Well, who's your God and who do you think you are?" So Moses then starts to perform magic. The first one he does is, from his stick, he creates a snake. The Egyptians also practice magic. So what do? They produce their own snakes. But guess what happens next? The Pharaoh's magician's snakes are eaten by Moses' snake. Yep. So they do a couple more. They produce different things. The Egyptian magicians follow along. But every time they produce something that Moses does, it turns out to be a disaster. So eventually, the Pharaoh says, "Okay, you can all go." So they go off. So eventually, they settled down in what is now Israel. And during this period, they changed from being a polytheistic religion. Polytheism means many gods, like the Greeks, Romans, Norse, etc. And then they become what's called a henotheistic religion, which means they believe in many gods, but our God, Yahweh, is the most important God. And from there, they move off into monotheism. But when they move into monotheism, it becomes a monarchy, and then from the initial free thinking comes control. So things like witchcraft, sorcery, etc. are banned. They're put on one side. Why is this important? Because this is what actually moves off into the two religions which now control most of the world take from it, which are Christianity, which is the largest religion on the planet, and Islam, which is the second largest. So you go from a period where people are able to use their minds to actually influence nature and to help each other. You go into a period, especially after Constantine kind of consolidates Christianity, what happens is people are actually condemned for doing anything outside of what the church teaches. And some of you know the history. And we had things like the Inquisition, right? And then we had all the witch trials which happened in Europe and America. So in other words, if you think outside of the lines of what the church is teaching, you're going to get punished. Even scientists. So remember, Galileo, he had come to the conclusion that unlike what a lot of the world thought, the sun did not revolve around the earth, but the earth revolved around the sun. So he's hauled off before the Inquisition, and had he stuck to his principles, he would have probably been executed. So he caves in, right? Which, hey, let's face it, a lot of us would do that, right? He caves in, He's a free thinker, but he caves in. He says, okay, you're right. The sun revolves around the earth. But under his breath, which they don't hear, he says, but it still moves. And he's talking about the earth moving around the sun. So with the edge of enlightenment, things start to change. People start to think more freely. And eventually, we come to a period in time which is really our ancestors. How are we doing? I don't want the trap door to open. So this is where it links back into what we're talking about today. So eventually, on the scene in somewhere around about 1830-ish, a gentleman comes along who figures out that he's going to cure himself. Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. He was a watchmaker from the Northeast. He had what was called in those days consumption. Consumption nowadays would be called tuberculosis. And he heals himself. And he thinks, well, how did I do this? And he comes to the conclusion that he has cured himself through the power of his mind. And then he starts thinking back. By the way, it's hot under these lights, in case anybody wants to know. Right?
Are you having a hot flash, David?
No, I'm having a hot bulb flash, actually. So, anyway, so he comes to the conclusion when he looks back in history, he thinks, wow, that's what Jesus did. Jesus just knew how to use his mind to influence people, and then people were cured, And then a lady by the name of Mary Baker Eddy comes along, and she gets cured when she's seen Quimby. And initially she goes along with his thinking, and then she goes off in another direction. She takes it off in a religious direction, and she changes the way she looks at things, even to the extent that she decides that the material reality you see here is not real, it's unreal. So there's only the spiritual realm. And this is where I need my notes, actually. So Mary Baker Eddy goes off in one direction, but more people come along. There's Warren Felt Evans. He published The Mental Cure in 1869. Julius and Annetta Dresser. And they actually helped Quimby to produce the Quimby system of healing. And then their son, Horatio Dresser, he became a leading figure in the New Thought movement. And he edited Quimby's writings. So where does this lead us? It leads us into people in the New Thought era. It leads us to the founders of Unity, but it also leads us into Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes was a product of what I've just been talking about. So what you see today is a product of all that. So why is this relevant, and what is it about magic? Well, Ernest Holmes wrote a book called Your Magic Mind. And this is, and you can look it up, and it's actually, if you want to get a copy, it's on the Science of Mind archives. So Science of Mind, you can type it, scienceofmindarchives.org. They're tapping it in on the front row now, I know. So what I'm really telling you is this, that magic to me is twofold. It's the magic of how everything came into existence, but it's also the magic of the way that we use our minds, and our teachings in Science of Mind and Unity, Divine Science, and related religions are telling you that you can actually alter your circumstances and other people's circumstances by the use of your mind. And this is the magic. This is the real magic. And then we'll come to a point where we'll actually reach what one of my favorite authors called Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, and I'm reading a quote directly. He said, "Someday, after mastering the mind, the wind, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire." And that is the direction that I am knowing that the whole universe is heading. So as we come to the end of my talk, and I remember, that's what I was going to tell you. I remember once when Barbara and I were at a mass in The Hague, the Netherlands, and the priest got up to give his sermon, and then he said, "But it's going to be mercifully short." So everybody thought that was kind of cool. So if you only remember two things today, it's that magic is in the universe, and that magic is in your own mind. And I encourage each and every one of us to use our mind, to do our spiritual work every single day, to take some quiet time, to use spiritual mind treatment, and to improve your life and improve the lives of everyone around you. So let's know together now, there's one life. That life is God. That life is all the life there is. And that life is present now in each and every single person here. It's present in each and every single person in the world, in the universe. And I am one with that one mind, as is everyone here in the room and everyone online. And I am knowing that as we move forward in human history, that we use our minds to reach that critical mass. And when we reach critical mass, we will reach that point that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin called the Omega point. And humanity will begin to operate in love. And I claim this especially for the areas of the world that are now undergoing strife and toil. And in particular, I am knowing a successful outcome for the peace negotiations and the peace treaty that is taking place now between Israel and Hamas. I'm knowing peace in the whole Middle East where I lived for so long. I'm knowing peace in the hearts of all human beings. And I'm knowing that this is truth. And I release this truth into that divine law with wonderful gratitude, saying, "It is done, and so it is."
All right. Since Reverend David did the heavy lifting of doing the talk, I'm going to do the announcements. And there's always a whole lot going on. We have 2 book studies, one on Wednesday and one on Mondays that are ongoing. They change books when they run out of material in the one book. So you can always join that. The Philosophy Friday, again, ongoing. And we never know what we're going to talk about in that. A couple of things to highlight that are coming up. We do seasonal meditations, and the next one coming up is Samhain, which is Halloween. That will be the last Sunday, about 12:30, right after service. It's a brief meditation, a fun discussion, and snacks. That's about it. So, it's just a good time to be with your community. There is also on the first Sunday, there are 2 things happening. On Zoom, there will be a writers, what did he call it? Basically, it's when writers get together and talk about their work. I hate to call it, I guess it's a discussion group. That's what we'll call it, a writers discussion group. And that is led by one of our newest practitioners, John Herron, who is a playwright, and that's what inspired him to do this. He's working on a new play. And then also on November 1st is the Sound Circle. If you have not partaken in the Sound Circle, you don't have to be a musician, but you can bring any instrument you would like. They do provide drums, and it is family friendly. It's a lot of fun for the kids. So that'll happen on November 1st as well. And then the only other thing that I want to mention is coming up in November, but I don't know the actual start date. Reverend Jesse will be teaching an Emma Curtis Hopkins class, which is the one name that Reverend David didn't mention. Look, you taught me a word I didn't know. And that thrills me beyond belief. Me coming across a word I'd never heard before, that just made me really happy. So, henotheism. I'd never heard that before. I had to look it up, and I was like, no, that's a real word. Yay! So now I have a new rabbit hole to dive down. So there's always things going on. If you want to know, the best way to do is to get on the email. If you are in the room and have not signed up, you can do that in the I almost said the vegetable. You can sign up in the vestibule. And if you are online, there is a link in the chat. So please feel free to sign up for that email. It is a blind CC. Nobody will see your email. So nobody else is going to you're not going to start getting random emails from anybody else from us. We do not do that. And I think that about covers it, And then the last thing is, it's the favorite part of every single minister. Please read the sarcasm. None of us like asking for money, and yet it is part of our job. Trust me, when I was in ministerial school, that's the one thing whenever we would create services for class, that's the one thing we would always get docked on. Well, you didn't do giving time. What? Right. Giving time. So what you give to the center is what allows us to spread this message. And we work very hard to make the best use of what you do give us. That includes your time, your talents, and your money. So what I invite you to do now, I'm assuming, Chip, you are the basket man. Take your gift in hand, either mentally or if you physically have it, and know all of the good that we do with it. And join me in saying, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is. And I'm going to take a brief inspiration from the cave paintings. My undergraduate degree is in archaeology, and so I know just a little bit more than the average person. And one of the coolest things that I've learned about the cave paintings is that they are deep in the caves. You don't just walk into a cave and see cave paintings. You have to crawl through some pretty narrow tunnels, and fairly deep in, so that by the time you get to where the cave paintings actually are, it's dark. There is no light other than the light that you bring with you. Now, if we are going to discuss our Paleolithic ancestors, what kind of light were they taking with them? Torches. Okay, what do torches do? Flicker. One of the coolest things that they figured out about the cave paintings is that in torchlight, the way that they are layered, they look like they are alive. The animals and the hands and the figures move in the torchlight. Now, you cannot tell me that is not magic. That is magic. So, my suggestion is, in this week coming, find yourself a cave, crawl in deep with your torchlight, and watch the figures dance. Other than that, join me in the sacred. Know that there is one life, one power, one presence, one love. As I am a manifestation of that power, I am a channel for that love. I am a vessel of that presence. So too do I know that each and every one of you are. As we walk through this week and we consider our ancestors and the magic that they saw all around them, I invite that magic forward into our lives now. That as we listen to the birds sing, we hear the magic. As we feel the breeze caress our skin, we feel the magic of life flowing ever onwards. There was no beginning, there will be no end. And the magic surrounds us, holds us, carries us. Because that magic is also love. And when we know love, when we are love, magic things happen. Whatever it is that you are working on, the magic is there for you now. It merely awaits your recognition of it, your acceptance of it, your willingness to allow it to flow through you. And I know that you know this deep truth, written before there was light. And it flows through you now. And I am grateful. I am grateful that we still believe in magic. I am grateful that we still know that we are magic. I am grateful that we recognize that we are that divine presence. I am grateful for a teaching that reminds us who we are. A community that comes together to look in each other's eyes and see the divine looking back at them. I am grateful for our ministers, our practitioners, our musicians. I am grateful for each and every one of you. I am grateful for the technology, when it works, and even when it doesn't, that allows us to spread this message out into the ethers. And I am grateful because it feels good to be grateful. And I release my word into the law with love, knowing that it is done. And so it is. So it is.
Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am. I choose it. I trust it. I use it. And I love it. And so it is.